everyone, this is Kaviyarasi and I am so delighted to have you all here. I have started this channel to post unlimited MCQs for UPSC. So if you are someone who is preparing for UPSC or some other competitive exam, this video is highly recommended for you. So in this series, we shall start with historical background from Lakshmikant. Historical background is the topic which we are going to cover in this series from Lakshmikant. So this question I have taken as model. This question I have taken as model from 2026 UPSC question paper. So all these questions are based on the model of 2026 question only. So let's move on to the questions. So the first question is, consider the following statements with reference to Regulating Act of 1773. So the question is on Regulating Act. So this question is on Regulating Act of 1773. The first statement is, there is no provision in Regulating Act of 1773 that designated the Governor General of Bengal as Governor General of Bengal. This statement is wrong. Actually, there is a provision. So the next statement, seeing the next statement, there is no provision in the Regulating Act of 1773 that prohibited the servants of East India Company from engaging in private trade or accepting presents or bribes from native people. Actually, this statement is also wrong. There was a provision that prohibited the servants of East India Company from engaging in private trade. Okay, so now seeing the third statement, there is no provision in the Regulating Act of 1773 that provided for the establishment of a Supreme Court at Calcutta. There was a provision indeed. So this statement is also wrong. So the correct answer is B. There is no correct statement in this question. Okay, so now moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Amending Act of 1781. This act is also called as Declaratory Act. Declaratory Act. Saying the first statement, there is no provision in the Amending Act of 1781 that exempted the actions of the Governor General and his council from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court at Calcutta. This statement is wrong because there is a provision in the Amending Act which exempted the actions of the Governor General from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court at Calcutta. So this statement is wrong. Seeing the second statement, there is no provision in the Amending Act of 1781 that specifically stated that the Supreme Court was to have jurisdiction over all the inhabitants of Calcutta. This statement is also wrong. There was a provision indeed in the Amending Act. Moving on to the third statement, there is no provision in the Amending Act of 1781 that required the Supreme Court to administer the personal law of defendants in matters concerning inheritance and succession. This statement is also wrong because there was a provision indeed. So all the three statements are wrong here. So the correct answer is B for this question. Okay, let's pass to the third question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Pitt's India Act of 1784. This is a very important question with respect to UPSC. So now let's see the first statement. It distinguished between the commercial and political functions of the East India Company. Yes, this statement is correct. It established a six-member board of to control manage political affairs. Yes, this statement is also correct. It gave the board of control full power and authority to direct and control all acts, operations, and concerns related to civil, military, and revenues of the company's territories in the East Indian Company. This statement is also correct. So the correct answer is that all the three statements are correct. This is the correct answer for the third question. Moving on to the fourth question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Charter Act of 1793. It extended the trade monopoly of the East India Company in India for a further period of 10 years. Actually, this statement is wrong. Why? Because it further period of 20 years. It is not 10 years. So this statement is wrong. Seeing the second one, it separated the revenue administration from the judicial functions of the company, a significant step known as Cornwallis Code. Yes, this statement is correct. It granted the power of appointing the Governor General of India to the Crown, thereby ending the company's authority over this key appointment. No, this is wrong. It is not to the Crown. Actually, the power was given to Court of Directors. Court of Directors. Hence, this statement is also wrong. So, the correct answer is that D. There is only one correct statement. This is the correct answer. D is the correct answer for this question. Let's move to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Charter Act of 1813. It abolished the trade monopoly of the East India Company in India for all goods, including tea and trade with China. This statement is wrong because except tea and trade with China, it included all goods. Okay, so this statement is wrong. Seeing the second statement, it permitted Christian missionaries to come to India and spread their religion and religious ideas. Yes, this statement is correct. So the third statement, it made a specific provision for an annual grant of 1 lakh rupees for the promotion of literature and encouragement of education in India. Yes, this statement is also correct. So the correct answer is C. Now let's move on to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Charter Act of 1833. It made the Governor General of Bengal the Governor General of India and vested in him all civil and military powers. Yes, he was vested with all civil and military powers. Second point is it entirely abolished the trade monopoly of East India Company in India, including trade in tea and trade with China. Yes, this statement is also correct. Now, seeing the third one, it provided that no Indian subject should be denied any place, office, or employment under the company on grounds of religion, place of birth, or color. Yes, this is also correct. So, the answer is all the three statements are correct. Let's move on to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Charter Act of 1853. It separated for the first time the legislative and executive functions of the Governor Council, introducing a new legislative council. Yes, this statement is correct. It entirely abolished the trade monopoly of the East India Company, effectively making it just an administrative body under the ground. Yes, this statement is also correct. It introduced an open competition system for the selection and recruitment of civil servants, which was then extended to Indians for the first time. Yes, this statement is also correct. So all three statements are correct. This is the A is the correct option. The question is, consider the following statements with reference to Indian Councils Act of 1861. It introduced a new legislative council for Bengal, which was first of its kind outside of Governor General's council. So this statement is correct. It specified that the Legislative Council could only discuss legislative proposals placed before it by the Governor General and could not address other public matters. Yes, this is also correct. It provided that at least half of the members of the Legislative Council, both official and non-official, must be non-official. Must be British subjects. No. The thing is, official subject is not allowed. So this statement is wrong. So the correct answer is C. C is the correct answer. This question is, consider the following statements with reference to the Government of India Act of 1858. It provided that the India henceforth was to be governed by and in the name of Crown, thereby ending the dual government of the Court of Directors and Board of Control. Yes, this statement is correct. It established the office of the Secretary of State for India, who was to be a member of British Cabinet and was vested with complete authority and control over Indian administration. Yes, this is also correct. It created a 15-member Council of India to assist the Secretary of State, with at least half of its members having served or resided in India for at least 10 years. Yes, this is also correct. So all the three statements are correct. A is the correct answer. Now let's move on to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Indian Councils Act of 1892. It provided for the nomination of non-official members to the legislative councils by certain bodies like universities, municipalities, thereby introducing a limited use of election. The first option is correct. This is a correct statement. It specifically prohibited the legislative council from discussing the financial statement. No, this is wrong. It actually allowed. So this statement is wrong. It allowed for a considerable increase in the number of additional members in the central and provincial legislative councils, making the non-official majority possible. No, this is also wrong. Making the official majority possible. So the correct answer is D. There is only one correct statement. So other questions we can see in the part 2. Thank you.